Join me at feast, servant Maiden whispered to giant Viking, unaware he was the Jarl. The great hall of Jarl Eirik's stronghold rose against the storm like a dark fortress of stone and timber, its tall windows flickering with torchlight. Inside, the long tables were lined with carved wooden benches, polished by generations of hands. The smell of roasted meat mingled with the smoke of the hearth, and laughter, loud and coarse, bounced from the high ceiling. Amid the chaos of the evening feast, Astrid moved quietly, her steps careful and measured. She was a servant maiden, small in stature but quick in mind, her brown hair tied neatly behind her head. She carried a tray of goblets filled with mead, weaving between armored warriors and shouting minstrels. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, though there was always some of that in the hall, but from the thrill of life within the walls, so full of stories and secret glances she would never have otherwise. Astrid paused for a moment near the long table, trying to place the tray down without spilling a drop. The hall was alive with music. A harpist plucked strings that shimmered like cold water, and a bard's voice recited the deeds of heroes long gone. For a moment, Astrid allowed herself a small smile. It was a rare thing to feel at peace here, even for a fleeting second. Then a shadow fell across her path. She looked up to see a figure standing quietly against the far wall. He was unlike any man she had ever seen. Tall, broad, and imposing, he seemed carved from the same stone as the hall itself. His long hair was dark as midnight, and his beard was thick, framing a face both stern and strangely handsome. His eyes, sharp and alert, followed her every move. Astrid felt her pulse quicken. For a moment, she hesitated, as though some part of her knew that this man was not like the others. He carried a presence that commanded the air around him. But she was bold in her own way, curious and fearless in the little corners of the world she could explore. "Join me at feast," she whispered, almost to herself, carrying the tray. It was not meant for him. It was a fleeting thought, a playful invitation in her mind that somehow slipped past her lips. The giant of a man turned slowly and his eyes met hers. There was a silence so deep it seemed the hall itself had paused to watch. He stepped closer, each movement careful yet powerful, his boots thudding softly against the wooden floor. Astrid felt a strange mix of fear and fascination. Her hands tightened on the tray, and for a moment she thought she might drop it. "You speak to a stranger as if he were an old friend," the man said, his voice low and resonant. "Do you not know who stands before you?" Astrid blinked. I did not, I only." Her voice trailed off. She realized too late that her words had drawn attention. Some of the men nearby turned their heads, curiosity sparking in their eyes, though none dared approach him. The man's gaze softened slightly, though a hint of amusement lingered at the corners of his mouth. "Perhaps," he said, "there is courage in your voice. Few dare speak so freely in this hall." Astrid swallowed, trying to steady herself. Something about him was both terrifying and strangely comforting. She wanted to look away, but her eyes were drawn to him as though held by invisible threads. I did not mean to offend," she said softly. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "No offense. Courage is rare here, and it deserves notice." Her heart pounded in her chest. She could feel her cheeks flush, a warmth spreading across her face. It was not common for anyone, much less a man so mighty and silent, to notice her in this way. Yet his words carried no mockery, only a quiet weight like a river cutting through stone. Astrid placed the tray down on a nearby table, hands trembling slightly. "Then, will you join the feast?" she asked, her voice firmer this time. The hall's noise seemed to fade around her, leaving only the man and the flickering torchlight. For a moment he said nothing. Then a smile, small but deliberate, curved his lips. "Perhaps I shall. But tell me, what makes a servant maiden so brave as to speak to a giant?" Astrid's breath caught. She could see the faint shadow of humor in his eyes, though the rest of his expression remained unreadable. I do not know," she admitted. Maybe because no one else sees me at all." The man's eyes darkened for a fraction of a second, a storm hiding behind them. "Few do," he said quietly, almost to himself. Then he extended a hand, not in threat but in invitation. "Come then, show me the feast through your eyes." Astrid hesitated, then allowed herself to be guided toward the long tables. Her pulse raced, a mixture of fear and wonder. Around them, the hall continued its chaos, but for Astrid, it was as though they had stepped into a world apart, where the noise faded and only the flickering light and the weight of his presence remained. As they walked, she noticed the subtle details of him, the way his boots made no sound despite their size, the careful way his hands rested near the hilt of a sword, the strange softness in his eyes when he looked at her. Every step seemed measured, deliberate, yet natural, as if he belonged to this world and to some other, secret one as well. When they reached the table, he studied the food with a faint curiosity, as if tasting it with his eyes before he touched it. Astrid found herself smiling. "It is simple fare," she said, "but it is what we have and we make it well." He nodded, his gaze lingering on her. "I will trust your judgment then." There was a silence, comfortable in its own way, broken only by the music and laughter around them. For Astrid, each passing moment felt suspended, like the quiet before a storm. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand him, but the words seemed trapped in her throat, too small for the weight of the moment. Finally, he turned to her, his expression serious again. "You speak with courage, Astrid. Remember this night. It may be the last time you feel the freedom to speak so freely." She blinked at him. How did he know her name? Her heart skipped a beat. I am not sure I understand." "Perhaps you will," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The world is not always what it seems, and those who wander too carelessly often find themselves at the center of greater stories than they imagined." Astrid felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in his words, something more than warning, a promise perhaps, or a challenge. She wanted to ask him who he really was, but the moment passed, and he only nodded once before turning his attention to the hall again. The feast continued around them, but Astrid's mind was elsewhere. She thought of the giant, his eyes that seemed to see everything, his presence that made the hall feel both smaller and larger at once. She felt a strange pull toward him, a curiosity that mingled with fear and wonder. As the evening wore on, the storm outside worsened, rain lashing against the windows, lightning flashing across the cliffs. And in the midst of the revelry, Astrid sensed that this night, this fleeting, extraordinary night, was the beginning of something she could not yet name, something that would change the course of her life forever. The last words of the bard rang out through the hall, a song of kings and warriors, of curses and destinies. Astrid listened, her heart thumping in time with the drums of the music, and she felt the giant's gaze return to her, intense and unreadable. "You will see," he said softly, almost a whisper, "that courage often comes with a price, and sometimes it is the smallest voice that carries the heaviest truth." Astrid's breath caught. She felt a mixture of fear and anticipation, a thrill she could not shake. She wanted to ask more, to understand, to follow him wherever this path might lead. But the hall's noise returned in full, and he vanished into the crowd as suddenly as he had appeared. Alone, Astrid held the empty tray against her chest, heart racing. The giant was gone, but the weight of his presence lingered, a shadow over her thoughts. She knew deep down that her life would never be the same. And somewhere in the dark corners of the hall, a secret waited, hidden in shadow, that would soon demand her courage in ways she could not yet imagine. The storm raged on outside, and the hall echoed with laughter and music, but Astrid's mind was already turning to the question that would not leave her. Who was this giant, really? And in the shadows, Eirik watched, silent, knowing that the smallest spark could ignite a fire neither of them could yet imagine. The wind had calmed by morning, leaving a quiet hush over the northern cliffs. Snowflakes drifted slowly down from the gray sky, settling on the stone battlements and the frozen ground below. The stronghold, a fortress of stone and timber, seemed almost peaceful in the pale light, as if the storm had washed away all noise and left only memory behind. Astrid moved carefully through the corridors, carrying a small basket of bread and herbs for the kitchens. The hallways were empty, save for the occasional clatter of armor or the faint scrape of a broom against stone. She had avoided the great hall since the previous night, though the memory of the giant lingered in her mind. His eyes, dark and sharp, had left a mark she could not erase. She wondered why he had spoken to her, why he had noticed her in a place where no one else ever seemed to. As she approached the stairway leading to the battlements, she caught sight of a tall figure standing in shadow. Her breath hitched. It was him, the giant, the stranger whose presence had stirred both fear and fascination in her heart. He leaned against the stone railing, arms crossed, gazing out at the gray horizon where the sea met the sky. He did not speak immediately. For a long moment they simply looked at each other. Astrid felt a strange pull toward him, a mixture of curiosity and caution. She stepped closer, careful not to startle him. "You came out early," he said finally, his voice low and steady. "Few have the courage to wander the battlements before the sun rises." Astrid felt a small smile tug at her lips. "The snow is quiet," she said. "It feels peaceful somehow." He turned his gaze back to her, eyes softening slightly. "Peace is rare in these halls. Few notice it when the noise fills every corner. You notice more than most, Astrid." Her heart skipped. How did he know her name? She looked down, twisting the basket nervously. I suppose I just watch," she said softly. "Sometimes it feels safer than talking." He nodded, a faint shadow of amusement on his face. "And yet you spoke to me yesterday, even knowing nothing of who I am." "That takes bravery or foolishness." Astrid's cheeks flushed. "I didn't mean to be bold," she admitted. "I only thought it was polite." He studied her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then he spoke almost in a whisper. "Perhaps politeness is a form of courage when the world expects fear instead." Astrid's pulse quickened. His words held a weight she could not place, and she found herself drawn closer to him, though she did not understand why. There was something in his presence, a pull that made her aware of every heartbeat, every breath. They stood in silence for a few moments, the wind brushing past them, carrying the faint scent of salt from the sea. Then he spoke again. "There are things you do not know, Astrid. Things about this hall, about its people, and about me. Do you wish to hear them?" Her eyes widened. Yes," she said, though a part of her hesitated. The last time she had been curious, it had led her into unexpected trouble. He gestured for her to follow him along the battlements. The snow crunched softly beneath their boots, the sound almost lost in the whisper of wind. "Then you must promise me something," he said. "You must listen carefully, and you must not speak of these things to anyone." "Not yet." "I promise," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. He led her to a small, hidden alcove where the wind could not reach, and they leaned against the stone, looking out at the gray sea. "I am not merely a warrior," he said quietly. "I am more than that. I am the Jarl of this hall, though few know me by my true name. I move among my people in shadow to understand them, to see what is hidden behind fear and loyalty." Astrid gasped softly. "The Jarl," her voice trembled. You are the one who rules them all," he nodded, though his expression was serious. "Yes, and yet, even with that power, I am bound by things I cannot control. There are dangers here within the hall and beyond that reach further than swords and shields can touch." Astrid felt a shiver run down her spine. She had imagined kings and warriors, but never someone so close, so real, and so human. "And you spoke to me yesterday, even knowing who I am." He turned to her, his eyes intense. "Because you are not like the others. You are brave in a way that cannot be measured by strength or skill. You see more than you should. And that is dangerous, yes, but it is also rare." She looked away, embarrassed, and felt warmth creeping across her cheeks. I don't know why you notice me, she whispered. Perhaps because you are the only one who dares to be yourself, he said. His voice was softer now, almost gentle. Most people hide behind their fear. You do not. Astrid's heart thumped wildly. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand him better, but words failed her. The silence stretched, and in it a connection formed, quiet yet undeniable, like the faint glow of dawn on the horizon. Suddenly, a sharp cry echoed from the hall below. Astrid's pulse leapt. Irik's eyes narrowed. "Trouble," he said, his voice tense. "Stay here, do not move." But Astrid shook her head. I can help," she said. Fear clashed with courage in her chest. She could not simply stand aside while something happened in her home. Irik studied her, his expression unreadable. "You are brave or foolish," he said. "Very well, but stay close and do exactly as I say." Together they descended to the hall, moving swiftly and silently. Shadows shifted as they passed. Servants and guards went about their morning tasks, unaware of the storm that was about to come. In the courtyard, a group of men had gathered, shouting, as one of the kitchen apprentices struggled to carry a basket of supplies that had spilled across the snow. Irik moved with quiet authority, his presence alone commanding attention. Astrid followed closely, her breath visible in the cold air, her hands clenched at her sides. "Step aside," Irik said, his voice low but carrying. The men froze, turning to him with awe and fear. His size and authority filled the space like a storm cloud. Astrid felt a thrill watching him command the scene without drawing a weapon. The trouble was minor, nothing more than a misunderstanding and some careless shouting. But in the way Irik handled it, Astrid saw his mind as well as his strength. He did not strike, he did not punish unfairly. He simply spoke once with certainty, and the chaos stilled. When it was done, he turned to her. "Do you see?" he asked. "Leadership is not always measured in violence. Sometimes it is the quiet control, the way one carries oneself, that changes hearts and minds." Astrid nodded, awed. I understand," she said, though the truth was that she only understood a small part. Irik smiled faintly, and for a moment the sternness in his eyes softened. "You will learn, Astrid. In time, you will see that the world is larger than you imagine and darker too. But courage, like yours, is the light that can pierce it." The sky above had lightened, turning pale gray, and the first faint rays of sun touched the snow. Astrid felt a strange mix of relief and longing, as though the world had opened before her, and yet she could not step fully into it. She wanted to ask him more, to follow him into every secret of the hall, but something held her back. Irik placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but not harsh. "The hall has many secrets," he said softly, "and some are not meant to be revealed all at once. Trust me, Astrid, if you are meant to see more, it will come, but you must be patient and careful." Astrid swallowed hard, nodding. The warmth of his hand lingered longer than expected, a quiet reassurance that she could not name. I will be careful," she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment, eyes searching, as though reading the thoughts she could not speak. "Good," he said finally, "because soon you will be part of things far larger than yourself. And once that begins, there will be no turning back." A cold wind swept across the battlements as Irik turned back toward the sea, watching the horizon with a distant expression. Astrid remained still, the weight of his words pressing on her heart. She realized that the hall, the feast, the storm, they were only the beginning. Something far greater, far darker was coming, and it would demand courage beyond anything she had yet imagined. The snow continued to fall, quiet and relentless, and in the gray morning light, Astrid made a silent promise to herself. She would be ready. For the giant, for the hall, for whatever fate had begun to stir between them. And somewhere in the shadows of the fortress, Irik knew that the spark he had seen in her, the quiet strength, the courage, the daring, was rare. Dangerous, perhaps, but rare and necessary. The day stretched on, filled with whispers, small tasks, and cautious glances. And as night approached once more, Astrid knew that when the moon rose, the true tests of courage, loyalty, and heart would begin. For now, though, all that remained was a quiet anticipation, a bond forming in silence, and the unspoken promise that neither of them could ignore. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and the story between them was only beginning. The northern sun barely pierced the gray clouds that hung low over the stronghold. Snow still blanketed the battlements, and the wind carried a chill that cut through even the thickest layers of wool. The hall was quiet in the morning, the servants bustling about their duties, preparing the space for another day of feasts, council meetings, and the steady rhythm of life within the fortress. Yet for Astrid, the quiet carried an edge of tension she could not shake. She moved through the corridors, balancing a tray of bread and cheese. Her mind replayed the events of the past days, the giant's gaze, his words, and the strange pull she felt whenever he was near. Eirik, the Jarl in disguise, had begun appearing in subtle ways, sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes along the battlements, testing her courage, challenging her perception of the hall, and slowly drawing her into a world far larger than her own. As she reached the small courtyard near the kitchens, she noticed a figure leaning against the wall, watching her with quiet intensity. Her heart skipped. Eirik. His cloak was drawn tightly around him, but even in the dull gray light, his height and presence were unmistakable. "You are early," he said, his deep voice carrying a mixture of curiosity and something she could not quite name. "The morning is still young, but your courage brings you here." Astrid felt warmth in her chest, though it mingled with apprehension. I am used to work," she said softly. "It feels natural to be awake before others." He stepped closer, his boots silent against the stone. "There is more to courage than waking early," he said. "Sometimes it is the choices we make in silence, the moments no one sees but fate itself notices." Astrid's hands trembled slightly. His words always seemed to carry a weight she could not fully understand. She met his gaze, finding something in it that went beyond strength or command, something raw and human though wrapped in power. I don't understand," she admitted. "You will," he said quietly, almost a whisper. "You must learn patience, Astrid, and vigilance. There are things moving in the shadows of this hall, things that threaten more than walls or wealth. They reach for hearts, for loyalty, for truth." Her breath caught. "Enemies?" He shook his head. "Not yet, but there are whispers, and whispers can become storms. That is why you must be careful. That is why I watch you." Astrid's pulse quickened. "Why me?" Eirik's gaze softened, though his expression remained serious. "Because you are not like the others," he said. "You speak freely, yet you listen. You move carefully, yet you act boldly when it is needed. There are few who carry such strength quietly." She felt warmth creeping across her cheeks. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever seen her courage, let alone praised it. I only do what I must," she whispered. "Sometimes that is enough," he said. "Sometimes it is more than enough." Their quiet moment was broken by a shout from the hall. Astrid started, glancing nervously toward the windows. Eirik's eyes narrowed. "Come," he said. "We must see." Together they moved toward the great hall, moving swiftly and silently. Servants and guards went about their duties, unaware of the storm approaching. In the hall, a small group of men argued near the Jarl's seat, their voices rising in anger. Eirik's presence alone caused the noise to drop to a tense silence. "Step back," he commanded, his voice low but firm. The men froze, glancing at him with fear and awe. His size, his authority, and the aura of command he carried silenced the room without a sword being drawn. Astrid watched, fascinated, as he moved through the crowd, words precise, actions deliberate, power unspoken but unmistakable. When the tension eased, Eirik turned to her. "Do you see now?" he asked. "True strength is not always in the sword. Sometimes it is in how you carry yourself, how you move among those who doubt you, how you act when no one watches." Astrid nodded, awed. I understand," she said, though the truth was that she only grasped a fragment. Irik's gaze lingered on her. Good. That understanding will be tested soon. Over the next days, Astrid found herself drawn further into Irik's secret world. He began to trust her with small tasks beyond her usual duties, asking her to carry messages, observe the hall, and report minor disputes. Each task carried weight, each glance between them a silent conversation. The hall, once a place of noise and routine, became a landscape of unspoken tension, where every shadow and whisper mattered. One evening, under a pale moon, Eirik led her to a hidden balcony overlooking the cliffs. The sea below was dark and restless, waves crashing against the rocks, sending sprays of salt into the night air. Astrid shivered, though not from cold. The beauty and danger of the view mirrored the emotions stirring within her. "There is a curse," Eirik said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It has haunted my family for generations. It is old as these cliffs, older than the hall itself. Few believe in it, yet it has shaped everything we are, every choice we have made." Astrid's eyes widened. "A curse?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What kind of curse?" He shook his head. "It is not simple. It is not a tale told in songs or stories. It touches the mind, the heart, the bonds between people, and it cannot be broken by force alone." Her pulse quickened. "Then what can break it?" Eirik's eyes met hers, deep and intense. "Trust, courage, love, but not the kind of love spoken lightly in songs. True, quiet, unshakable, the kind that binds hearts even when the world turns against them." Astrid felt a shiver run down her spine. His gaze held hers as if weighing her, testing her resolve. "Do you trust me?" he asked. She swallowed hard. I think I do," she whispered. The words felt small and fragile, yet powerful in the chill night air. "Then you must be ready," he said. "Soon, the hall will demand more of us than simple courage. Choices will be made and lives will hang in the balance. And once those choices are made, there will be no turning back." Astrid nodded, heart racing. The wind tossed her hair around her face and the cold bit her fingers, but she did not move away. Something in her had shifted, something that made her feel both afraid and alive. The next morning, the hall erupted in unexpected tension. Rumors had spread of a rival chieftain plotting to challenge the Jarl's authority. Guards were on edge, and whispers of betrayal filled the corridors. Astrid worked quietly, carrying messages and observing the hall, noting every glance and every gesture. She felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, though she did not fully understand why she had been trusted with it. Eirik moved among the hall with silent authority, speaking only when necessary, yet every action he took seemed to ripple through the people around him. Astrid watched him, her admiration growing with every step, every careful command, every quiet decision. He was fearsome, yet fair, stern, yet gentle with those who needed guidance. That night, as the hall quieted and servants returned to their chambers, Eirik found her again on the hidden balcony. The moonlight made the snow sparkle like crushed diamonds, and the cliffs below were dark and mysterious. "You have learned quickly," he said, his voice low and approving. "Not everyone would have noticed the subtle threats, the small signs of unrest." Astrid felt a flicker of pride. "I try," she said. "I want to help." He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "And you will help," he said. "But helping will require more than courage. It will require heart. It will require choices that may change both of our lives forever." Her heart thumped in her chest. I am ready," she whispered, though the truth was that she did not know what awaited her, only that she wanted to stand beside him. Eirik stepped closer, the warmth of his presence brushing against her in the chill night. "Then you must trust me," he said, "for soon the hall will no longer be safe. Shadows move among us and the storm approaches, but with courage and trust perhaps we can face it together." Astrid's breath caught, but she did not move away. She had already felt the pull of destiny, of the strange bond forming between them, and she knew, deep in her heart, that whatever came next they would face it together. A sudden noise from below, the scrape of boots against stone, made them both glance down. The hall had not yet slept and the shadows held secrets still. Irik's expression hardened. "Soon," he murmured, "you will see the depth of what we face, and your courage will be tested like never before." The wind whipped around them, carrying the faint sound of the sea crashing against the cliffs. Astrid held her ground, her pulse racing, her mind filled with questions and fear, but also something deeper, a spark of hope, of daring, of belonging. And in that moment, under the pale moonlight, they both knew that the path before them would be filled with danger, choices, and fire. But it was a path they would walk together, hearts bound by courage, trust, and the quiet stirrings of something neither dared to name aloud. The night deepened, and the first signs of frost began to glaze the stone balcony. Astrid wrapped her arms around herself, feeling both the cold and the strange warmth of being seen, truly seen, by the giant who was more than he appeared. Irik's eyes never left hers. "Soon," he said again, voice low and almost tender, "everything will change, and when it does you must be ready, for the hall, for me, for yourself." Astrid nodded, her heart trembling with anticipation. She did not know what awaited them, only that the giant, the Jarl, had chosen to trust her, and she would not betray that trust. Somewhere in the shadows of the hall, danger stirred, and somewhere in her own heart, a quiet fire had begun to burn. The stage was set, the storm gathering on the horizon, and the next days would bring tests of loyalty, courage, and love that neither of them could yet imagine. The hall of the stronghold was silent, though the wind outside howled like a living thing. Snow pelted the stone walls, rattling the windows, and the northern cliffs groaned beneath the weight of the storm. Within the fortress, candles flickered, casting tall shadows across the long tables, the carved pillars, and the high ceilings. Tonight, the hall felt different, charged, as though every stone and beam had been waiting for this moment. Astrid moved quietly through the corridors, carrying a small lantern. Her breath was visible in the cold air, and her pulse raced with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She had felt it for days, the sense that something was coming, something she could not yet see, something that would demand every ounce of courage she possessed. She rounded a corner and froze. Irik was already there, leaning against the wall, his cloak heavy with snow from the battlements. His eyes, dark and intense, held a storm that mirrored the one outside. He turned to her and spoke softly. "The hall is no longer safe," he said. "The rival chieftain moves against us, and the curse, it grows stronger. We have little time." Astrid swallowed hard. What can we do?" Irik stepped closer, his hand brushing briefly against hers. "We face it together," he said. "Courage alone will not be enough. Trust, loyalty, and the bond between us will be the shield. You must trust me, Astrid, as I trust you." Her heart thumped wildly. She nodded, though her hands trembled. "I trust you," she whispered. Irik gave her a faint smile, one that softened the sternness of his features. "Then we begin." They moved to the great hall where the air was thick with tension. Guards stood at the doors, weapons ready, while servants huddled in corners, eyes wide with fear. Outside, the rival chieftain's forces had gathered, their horns sounding over the wind, announcing a siege that would test every part of the stronghold. Irik raised his voice, calm and commanding. "To your posts!" His words carried authority, and the hall moved as one, prepared for battle. Astrid followed him, heart pounding, her small role feeling heavier than ever. She carried messages, offered guidance, and observed every detail, passing information to those who could act. Hours passed in a blur of motion. Snow whipped through the open windows, and the clatter of weapons rang against stone. Yet it was not only the physical battle that mattered. The curse stirred, whispering in the shadows, tugging at hearts, testing loyalty and threatening fear. Astrid felt its chill brush against her mind, a cold weight that made her doubt herself. Irik noticed her faltering, his eyes locking onto hers. He spoke softly, almost a whisper amidst the chaos. "Focus on courage, Astrid. The curse cannot touch those who act from truth. Remember what I taught you. Trust, heart, and boldness will break it." She nodded, swallowing hard. She felt the warmth of his presence beside her, a steady flame in the cold and fear. That small spark of connection gave her strength. She moved with purpose, delivering messages, guiding the hesitant and calming the frightened, her quiet courage shining in the darkness. As the rival forces pressed against the gates, Eirik led the defenders with a strength that seemed larger than life. His sword was swift and sure, but more than that, his presence alone bolstered every heart in the hall. Astrid watched him, admiration and fear mingling in her chest, realizing that he was not only a warrior but a leader born of both steel and understanding. The rival chieftain finally breached a section of the hall, and chaos erupted. Astrid's heart raced as she saw men struggle against the invaders. Without thinking, she ran forward, helping a fallen guard rise, guiding frightened servants to safety. In that moment she understood Eirik's words fully. Courage was not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Eirik fought with relentless skill, his every move precise, his every command carried with authority. Yet even as he battled, he kept an eye on Astrid, ensuring she was safe. She felt the weight of his care and the intensity of their connection, and a surge of determination filled her. She would not falter, not now, not ever. The curse's presence grew stronger as the battle reached its height. Shadows seemed to twist and linger, whispers tugging at doubt, fear, and mistrust. Eirik's eyes flickered with the strain of resisting it. Astrid, realizing the nature of their danger, ran to his side. "You must fight it with me," she called over the roar of the battle. "We can break it together." He glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face. Then slowly he nodded. "You are right. Stay close. Do not let it touch your heart. Trust me." Hand in hand they focused, blocking out fear and anger, letting courage and trust fill every fiber of their being. The shadows recoiled at the strength of their bond. Astrid felt warmth spreading from her chest, a light in the darkness, and Eirik mirrored it, their hearts beating together like a shield. The curse, sensing their unity, faltered. The whispers ceased, the chill lifted, and a strange calm fell over the hall. Even the rival chieftain seemed to hesitate, unnerved by the sudden, almost tangible courage emanating from the defenders. Eirik seized the moment. With a single command, the defenders pushed back, and the invaders began to retreat. The gates were secured, the hall reclaimed, and the storm outside began to ease. Astrid collapsed against the wall, breathless but exhilarated. Eirik crouched beside her, his hand still holding hers. "You were brave," he said quietly, pride in his voice. "Braver than I could have imagined." Her chest heaved as she looked up at him. We did it," she whispered. "Together." He smiled faintly, and for the first time the sternness in his eyes softened completely. "Yes, together." For a long moment they sat in silence, the hall around them quiet except for the soft groans of the wounded and the gentle crackle of the fire. Astrid realized that in the face of fear, of shadows and threats, she had found something stronger than herself, courage born of trust, and a bond that had survived the greatest test of all. The next days were filled with quiet restoration. Guards repaired broken doors, servants tended to the wounded, and the hall returned slowly to its rhythm. Eirik moved among them with the same measured authority as before, but there was a subtle change, an ease, a trust in those who followed him. And he sought Astrid often, finding moments to speak to her quietly, away from the eyes of others. One evening, under the pale glow of the northern lights, Eirik led her once more to the hidden balcony. The cliffs below were white with snow, the sea dark but calm. Astrid felt a sense of peace, tempered by the memory of the storm they had faced. "You were extraordinary," Eirik said softly, his eyes meeting hers. "The courage you showed, it saved more than the hall. It saved hearts, mine included." Astrid's cheeks warmed. "I only did what I could," she said. I had to trust you." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And I trusted you. That trust, that courage is what broke the curse. It is what makes us stronger than fear or shadow." Her heart thumped. She had never imagined such words, such closeness. "Eirik, he smiled gently, interrupting her. "SHH, no need for words yet. Actions have already spoken and our hearts have answered." For a moment the wind paused, the world seemed to hold its breath, and Astrid felt the depth of their connection, stronger than fear, stronger than storms. She realized that she had not only survived the trials of the hall, but she had been changed, transformed by courage, trust, and love. Eirik stepped closer, taking both her hands in his. "You joined me at the feast," he said softly, "and now you have joined my heart. Nothing can undo that. We have faced the shadows together and we have emerged stronger. That is what matters." Astrid's eyes shone with tears of relief and joy. I am not afraid," she whispered. "Not with you." He pulled her into a careful, steady embrace, a promise of protection, trust, and shared life. Outside, the northern lights danced across the sky, painting the cliffs and sea in colors too vivid to name. Inside, the hall had quieted, but the story of their courage, loyalty, and love would echo for generations. The storm had passed, but the bond forged in its fury remained unbroken. Astrid and Eirik stood together, hearts intertwined, ready to face the world as partners, equal in courage, trust, and love. And as the first rays of dawn touched the snow, the fortress stood tall and whole once more, a symbol of resilience, of hearts that had faced fear and darkness and had found light within themselves and within each other. The shadow had been faced, the curse broken, and the hall once again was safe. But in the quiet moments, in the wind and the whisper of snow, Astrid and Eirik knew that the greatest stories were those written not only in battle, but in trust, courage, and the quiet fires of the heart. Together, they turned to face the rising sun, knowing that whatever challenges awaited them in the days ahead, they would face them not as master and servant, but as equals, bound by courage, trust, and a love that had been tested and proven true. The hall, the storm, the shadows, all had shaped them, and now, standing side by side, they were ready for whatever destiny awaited.